Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting and useful. Give me more ideas you want me to make. Enjoy watching the video. The old Super 8 home movie flickered on the dusty projector screen, a nostalgic kaleidoscope of faded colors and crackling audio. On it, two small figures, no older than 5, tumbled down a grassy hill, their laughter echoing through the years. Ethan Miller, a scrawny boy with a shock of sandy brown hair that perpetually fell into his eyes, wore an oversized astronaut helmet that kept slipping, while Lila Johnson, a blur of bright pink overalls and 2 bouncy ponytails, chased him with a plastic sword, declaring herself the protector of the moon base. Their mothers, best friends, and neighbors for decades often joked that the two were practically born attached at the hip, a sentiment that only grew stronger as the years passed. Their adjacent suburban houses on Maplewood Lane were more than just buildings, they were interconnected worlds. A worn path through Mrs. Gable's prize-winning rose bushes served as their secret shortcut, a shortcut they'd used countless times. From building elaborate blanket forts in Ethan's garage, complete with stolen snacks from Lila's pantry, to endless hours spent conquering virtual dragons in their shared video game adventures, their childhood was a tapestry woven with shared experiences. The Miller household, a cozy, slightly cluttered space filled with the scent of Mrs. Miller's baking and the soft hum of her sewing machine, was as familiar to Lila as her own. And for Ethan, Lila's home, with its vibrant artwork and the lively chatter of her parents, a lawyer and a graphic designer, felt like a second sanctuary. Elementary school was a blur of shared desks, passing whispered notes during history class, and frantic last-minute group projects, usually spearheaded by Lila's boundless energy and Ethan's quiet, methodical approach. They were the quintessential duo, the Ethan and Lila show, as their teachers affectionately called them. Middle school brought the awkward growth spurts, the first crushes that were never spoken aloud, and the burgeoning anxieties of fitting in. But through it all, their bond remained an unbreakable constant, a sturdy oak in the ever-shifting winds of adolescence. They had an unspoken language, a way of communicating with a glance or a subtle nudge that baffled their other friends. Ethan knew Lila's exact facial expression when she was secretly annoyed, but trying to be polite, and Lila could tell when Ethan was spiraling into an overthinking session just by the way he chewed on his lip. Now, as juniors at Westbridge High, their dynamic had subtly matured, yet the core of their friendship endured. Ethan, tall and lanky, still had that endearing shyness, especially around new people. He was the quiet observer, the one who listened intently and offered thoughtful, often surprisingly insightful, advice. He excelled in science, his room a miniature laboratory filled with bubbling beakers and circuit boards. He was genuinely kind, always the first to offer help with a flat tire or a struggling homework assignment, but he kept his deeper emotions locked away, shielded by a gentle smile and a self-deprecating humor. He harbored a secret passion for photography, finding solace in capturing the world through his lens, especially the candid, joyful moments of Lila. Lila, on the other hand, was a force of nature. With her bright, expressive eyes and a laugh that could fill any room, she was a magnet for people. She was on the student council, co-captain of the debate team, and a constant presence at every school event. Her infectious optimism and unwavering belief in the good of people made her incredibly popular, but sometimes, beneath the effervescent exterior, she yearned for moments of quiet reflection, something she rarely allowed herself. She had a keen eye for fashion, a bubbly personality, and a genuine, unwavering belief that her relationship with Ethan was a sacred, platonic bond, friends forever, a mantra she often repeated, perhaps a little too emphatically, to anyone who dared to suggest otherwise. Their usual after-school ritual involved migrating to the Daily Grind, a local coffee shop known for its mismatched furniture and excellent pastries, to tackle their homework. Today, however, the air felt different. Spring break was just around the corner, and the promise of freedom hung heavy in the air. Lila, buzzing with energy, was regaling Ethan with her plans to volunteer at an animal shelter and then binge-watch an entire season of her favorite K-drama. Ethan, nursing a lukewarm latte, listened with his usual patient smile, occasionally offering a witty remark that made her giggle. The conversation drifted to their upcoming college applications, a topic that usually brought a mix of excitement and apprehension. Lila, ever the realist, was outlining her ambitious plan to apply to several prestigious universities, her eyes shining with ambition. "I mean, we'll always be close, right, Ethan?" she asked, her voice bright, almost seeking reassurance. "No matter where we end up, we're like family. You're practically my brother." Ethan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his warm brown eyes. He took a slow sip of his latte, the warmth doing little to thaw the sudden chill in his chest. "Yeah, Lils," he managed, his voice a little too even. "Family." "Of course." He forced the smile back, a practiced mask that hid the quiet ache growing in his chest. He'd heard it before, countless times. Like a brother. Part of the family. Each pronouncement, though well-intentioned, felt like another brick in the wall he'd built around his true feelings for her. He looked at her, truly looked at her, the way her hair caught the afternoon sun, the crinkle around her eyes when she laughed, the infectious joy that radiated from her, and a silent, desperate longing echoed within him. He was her best friend, her confidant, her family. But he wanted so much more. Unaware of the silent storm brewing within him, Lila continued to chatter, completely oblivious to the depth of his unspoken affection. She genuinely loved Ethan, cherishing their bond above all else. The thought of them being anything more than best friends simply hadn't computed in her mind, not in the way it had for Ethan. He was Ethan, her rock, her constant. The idea of introducing romantic complications into their perfect, uncomplicated friendship felt almost sacrilegious to her. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the coffee shop, they packed up their bags. "See you tomorrow, F." Lila chirped, giving him a quick, sisterly hug before heading in the opposite direction. Ethan watched her go, a wistful expression on his face. The words she had said, "I don't think you and I could ever be together, because I see you as part of my family," echoed in his mind, each word a dull thud against his heart. He walked home slowly, the weight of his unspoken feelings heavier than his backpack. The evening air was cool, but inside, a quiet storm raged. He passed by Mrs. Gable's rose bushes, their thorny beauty a poignant reflection of his own entangled emotions. He knew he should have spoken up, should have confessed years ago. But fear, that crippling, insidious fear of rejection and of potentially shattering their precious friendship, had always held him back. And now it felt like he might have waited too long. The air crackled with electric energy, thick with the scent of popcorn, stale soda, and the nervous excitement of a Friday night. Westbridge High's gymnasium was a roaring cauldron of sound, every bleacher packed with students clad in the school's crimson and gold colors, their voices hoarse from cheering. The basketball season had been a nail-biter, and tonight was the final home game, a make-or-break match against their fiercest rivals, the Northwood Ravens. Ethan, perched awkwardly on the edge of a bleacher, was trying his best to look invested, but his gaze kept drifting to Lila, who was a whirlwind of enthusiasm just a few rows down. She was decked out in full Westbridge spirit, a crimson Wildcats jersey over a white long-sleeve tee, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail that bounced with every cheer. She was laughing, her face alight, as she led a chant with her closest friends, Chloe and Maya. Chloe, with her sharp wit and even sharper eyeliner, and Maya, whose gentle nature often belied her fierce loyalty, were Lila's constant companions, a trio of inseparable spirits. Ethan watched the way her eyes sparkled under the bright stadium lights, and a familiar ache settled in his chest. He was supposed to be here, cheering, but he felt like he was watching a movie of someone else's life, a life he was perpetually just outside of. The game was a nail-biter, going into overtime, and Westbridge managed to snatch a victory in the final seconds. The crowd erupted, a joyous cacophony of shouts and high-fives. Confetti cannons blasted, showering the court in gold and crimson streamers. Amidst the chaos, Ethan saw Ryan Carter, the captain of the basketball team, a blur of toned muscle and athletic grace, shaking hands with the opposing team before turning to his own jubilant teammates. Ryan was everything Ethan wasn't: effortlessly cool, charismatic, the kind of guy who commanded attention without even trying. He had a mop of perfectly tousled dark hair, an easy smile, and a confidence that seemed to radiate from him. He was the unspoken crush of at least half the female student body, and Ethan had noticed, with a sinking feeling, the way Lila's gaze would sometimes linger on him during assemblies or in the hallways. Suddenly, the arena lights dimmed, focusing a single spotlight onto the center of the court. A hush fell over the crowd, replaced by a ripple of excited whispers. Ryan, still in his sweat-soaked jersey, took a microphone from the athletic director, his smile a little nervous, a little triumphant. Ethan felt a prickle of unease. This felt different. Ryan cleared his throat, his voice amplified across the gymnasium. First, I just want to say, what an incredible game, guys. You're the best team a captain could ask for. A renewed roar of cheers erupted, which Ryan quieted with a raised hand. But there's something else I want to say tonight. Something important. He scanned the crowd, his eyes finally landing on Lila. Lila Johnson, he called out, his voice clear and resonant. Would you mind coming down here for a second? Ethan's heart did a strange, painful lurch. Time seemed to slow. He watched as Chloe and Maya nudged Lila, who looked utterly bewildered, her cheeks already flushing a deep rose. Hesitantly, she made her way down the bleachers, her initial confusion giving way to a shy smile as she reached the edge of the court. The spotlight followed her, illuminating her hesitant steps. Ryan walked towards her, his basketball shoes squeaking on the polished wood. He stopped just a few feet away, took a deep breath, and then, looking directly into Lila's eyes, he said, "Lila, you're amazing. You're smart, you're funny, you're the kindest person I know. And I know this might be a crazy thing to do in front of everyone, but I've liked you for a really long time. So, Lila Johnson, will you go to the spring fling with me? And maybe be my girlfriend?" The entire gymnasium erupted. Cheers, whistles, excited screams, and the rhythmic stomping of feet created a deafening wave of sound. Lila stood frozen, her eyes wide, her face crimson. She stammered, "Ryan. She hadn't expected this. Not like this." Her heart hammered against her ribs, a mix of shock and a strange, unfamiliar thrill. She didn't answer immediately, but the genuine surprise and the burgeoning blush on her face were answer enough for most. The crowd took her hesitation as shy acceptance, and the cheering intensified. Ethan felt a cold wave wash over him. He watched Lila, her embarrassment mingling with a definite spark of flattered interest. He saw the way her lips curved into a hesitant smile, the way her eyes, though wide with surprise, also held a certain undeniable warmth when she looked at Ryan. It wasn't a no. It wasn't even a strong maybe later. It was a moment of pure, raw possibility. The crowd's reaction, the sheer joy and excitement, only amplified the crushing weight in Ethan's chest. He couldn't stay. The triumphant roar of the crowd, the beaming smile on Ryan's face, and the undeniable flush on Lila's cheeks were too much to bear. He felt like an intruder, an invisible ghost witnessing a moment that was meant for someone else. He swallowed hard, his throat tight, and quietly, almost unnoticed amidst the general pandemonium, he slipped off the bleachers. He navigated through the throng of jubilant students, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the exit. The noise slowly faded behind him as he pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The parking lot was still bustling, but the overwhelming intensity of the gym was replaced by the familiar hum of car engines and distant chatter. Ethan walked aimlessly for a while, the crisp Oregon air doing little to cool the burning shame and regret in his heart. He ended up on the familiar path behind the school, a shortcut to the creek that bordered Westbridge, a place he often went to think. He found a secluded spot, a large, flat rock overlooking the gently flowing water, and sat down. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos, pictures of him and Lila through the years. There was one of them at the elementary school picnic, covered in watermelon juice. Another from a middle school dance, both of them looking awkwardly dressed, but grinning. And then a recent one, a candid shot he'd taken of Lila laughing at the daily grind, her face illuminated by the morning sun, completely unself-conscious. He loved that photo. He loved her. If only I had said something sooner, he whispered into the silent night, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. The thought was a familiar torment, a loop of what-ifs and should-haves that played endlessly in his mind. He lay back on the cold rock, staring up at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars, usually a source of comfort, seemed indifferent tonight, their twinkling lights mocking his silent despair. Just as a particularly bright star caught his eye, tracing an arc across the inky blackness, a brilliant streak of light pierced the sky. A meteor, burning fiercely as it plummeted through the atmosphere, left a shimmering trail in its wake before disappearing behind the distant tree line. It was a fleeting, breathtaking spectacle, usually a symbol of hope or a chance to make a wish. But tonight, for Ethan, it felt like a final, dramatic punctuation mark on his missed opportunity. He closed his eyes, a lone tear tracing a path down his temple. The star had vanished, leaving behind only darkness. Little did he know, that fleeting celestial event wasn't an end, but a beginning, the prologue to a truly extraordinary and utterly bewildering new chapter in his life. The alarm blared, a jarring cacophony that dragged Ethan from the depths of a restless sleep. He slapped at his nightstand, groaning. His head was still pounding from the emotional hangover of Friday night, and the last thing he wanted was to face a Monday morning. He squinted at the digital clock, 7 a.m. Time to get up. He stretched, feeling a peculiar stiffness in his limbs. And was that a strange, floral scent? His room usually smelled faintly of solder and old textbooks. He pushed himself up, but something felt wrong. The duvet was a pale rose color, adorned with delicate white embroidery, not his usual dark blue comforter. He blinked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and looked around. His breath hitched. This wasn't his room. The walls were a soft lavender, covered in posters of indie bands and abstract art. A brightly colored rug lay on the polished hardwood floor. On a corkboard, pinned among photos, was a collection of meticulously organized friendship bracelets. And on the nightstand, beside a collection of self-help books and a half-eaten bag of gummy bears, sat a framed picture of him and Lila. A candid shot from their last summer camp, Lila with her arms slung casually around his shoulder, both beaming. Ethan scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt lighter, smaller, strangely delicate. He rushed to the full-length mirror on the closet door and froze. The reflection staring back at him was not his own. It was Lila. Her bright, expressive eyes, now wide with terror. Her long, dark hair, disheveled from sleep, falling around a face that was undeniably hers. He raised a hand to his face, and the reflection mirrored the gesture perfectly. A high-pitched, strangled gasp escaped his lips, Lila's lips. He was in Lila's body. At the exact same moment, across Maplewood Lane, Lila Johnson was stirring from a dreamless sleep. She stretched, feeling unusually heavy, almost clunky. And what was that rough, prickly sensation on her chin? She usually woke up feeling soft and smooth. The room was dim, lit only by the sliver of light peeking through the blackout curtains. It smelled faintly of old pizza and something metallic, like electronics. She blinked, her vision a little blurry without her glasses, and reached for them on her nightstand. Except, this wasn't her nightstand. This was a wooden crate overflowing with comic books and various tech gadgets. Her eyes snapped open. The room was a chaotic but familiar mess, clothes strewn across a gaming chair, a whiteboard covered in complex equations, posters of superheroes and sci-fi movie franchises. A half-built robot sat on a workbench in the corner. This was Ethan's room. Her heart started to pound. This had to be a dream. A really, really weird dream. She stumbled out of bed, feeling a strange weight and awkwardness in her gait. She caught a glimpse of herself in the full-length mirror on the back of the door. The reflection was undeniably Ethan. His lanky frame, his sandy brown hair that fell perpetually into his eyes, his slightly crooked nose. And on his chin, a faint, prickly shadow. "Oh my God," she gasped, her voice surprisingly deep and unfamiliar. "Oh my God, why do I have a beard?" The sound that escaped her lips was a guttural shout, so unlike her own melodic voice, that it startled her, echoing oddly in the small room. Chaos ensued. "Ethan," in Lila's body, shrieked, a sound so un-Ethan that Lila's mother, Mrs. Johnson, immediately called up, "Lila, honey, are you okay? You sound like you've seen a ghost." Ethan, horrified, fumbled for a reply, but only managed a choked sob. He needed to get out. He needed to find Ethan. His Ethan. Lila, in Ethan's body, meanwhile, was trying to make sense of her reflection. She poked at the faint stubble, pulling at a stray hair on her chest, completely disoriented. "This is insane," she muttered, her new voice a low rumble. "This isn't happening. Ethan, where are you?" They both, by some unspoken instinct, ended up at their usual meeting spot in the park, the old oak tree by the creek where they used to carve their initials as kids. They spotted each other from a distance, both looking utterly distraught. Ethan, as Lila, was wearing Lila's pink pajama shorts and an oversized hoodie, trying to hide his face. Lila, as Ethan, was in Ethan's crumpled t-shirt and sweats, her hands running through her hair in utter disbelief. They converged under the oak tree, staring at each other, their minds reeling. "Ethan?" Lila, as Ethan, croaked, her voice still rough. "Lila?" Ethan, as Lila, whispered, his voice light and airy, utterly foreign to him. "You're me." Lila, as Ethan, exclaimed, gesticulating wildly with Ethan's hands. "And I'm you." "I know." Ethan, as Lila, wailed, sounding far too much like Lila. "What happened? How did this happen?" Panic set in, a dizzying spiral of disbelief and sheer terror. They pinched themselves, slapped each other, Lila, in Ethan's body, surprisingly hard, and even tried to wish it away. But nothing worked. Their bodies, their voices, their very physical essences were undeniably swapped. The realization hit them with the force of a tidal wave. They had truly, impossibly switched bodies. With school starting in less than an hour, and no logical explanation or immediate solution in sight, they had no choice. They had to pretend. They had to go to Westbridge High, acting as each other, and hope this bizarre magic would somehow reverse itself by the end of the day. Or, preferably, sooner. The morning was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Lila, in Ethan's body, found herself struggling with Ethan's backpack, which felt impossibly heavy and smelled faintly of old socks. She tried to mimic his slouch, his quiet demeanor, but her natural effervescence kept bubbling through. She nearly walked into a lamppost because she couldn't properly gauge Ethan's new height. Ethan, in Lila's body, felt utterly exposed in Lila's tighter clothes, her skirt feeling alarmingly short, her blouse surprisingly thin. He tried to mimic Lila's bouncy walk and confident stride, but ended up shuffling awkwardly, self-conscious of every movement. He felt an intense need to constantly smooth down her skirt, a gesture that earned him a few odd looks from passers-by. School was a minefield of hilarious, terrifying situations. First period was PE. Lila, in Ethan's body, had always dreaded PE, but Ethan, naturally athletic and coordinated, usually breezed through it. Today, however, was soccer. "All right, Miller." Coach Henderson boomed, tossing a ball towards Lila as Ethan. "You're playing offense. Let's see that footwork." Lila, whose soccer experience was limited to cheering from the sidelines, stared at the ball as if it were an alien artifact. She tried to kick it, missed spectacularly, and ended up tripping over his own feet, sending the ball careening into the goalkeeper's face. The entire class stared, incredulous. "Miller, what was that?" Coach Henderson yelled, rubbing his jaw. Lila just offered a feeble, new technique? Meanwhile, Ethan, in Lila's body, was enduring his own special brand of torture in drama class. Lila was a natural performer, always comfortable in the spotlight. Ethan was anything but. Their teacher, Ms. Albright, a dramatic woman with an affinity for method acting, instructed them to perform a short, improvised scene about a character discovering a long-lost secret. Ethan, trying to channel Lila's vivacity, ended up delivering a monologue about finding a forgotten grocery list with all the emotional intensity of a Shakespearean tragedy, complete with exaggerated hand gestures and a trembling lower lip. Chloe and Maya, sitting in the front row, exchanged bewildered glances. "Is Lila feeling okay?" Chloe whispered to Maya. "She's acting really weird. Like, even weirder than usual." Lunch was a social minefield. Ethan, in Lila's body, found himself at Lila's usual table, surrounded by her lively group of friends. Chloe immediately cornered him as Lila. "Okay, spill. What's up with Ryan? Did he say anything to you after the game? You totally left us hanging." Ethan's face went pale. He had completely forgotten about Ryan's public confession. He stammered, nothing. Nothing happened. Just, a lot of people were there." Maya, always perceptive, noticed his discomfort. "Lila, you're blushing. Are you sure nothing happened?" Ethan, mortified, felt Lila's cheeks flush, and he instinctively started fiddling with her hair. Then, Chloe pulled out a new tube of lip gloss. "Here, Lils, try this new shade. It'll be perfect for your date with Ryan." Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Date with Ryan? Lila, in Ethan's body, wasn't faring much better. Ethan's friends, a tight-knit group of self-proclaimed nerds who mostly talked about video games, obscure sci-fi, and Dungeons and Dragons, were baffled by Ethan's sudden change in demeanor. When they started discussing the latest patch update for their favorite MMORPG, Lila just blinked blankly. Is that like a new brand of moisturizer?" she asked, genuinely confused. Her attempts to feign interest in their intricate discussions about gaming strategy were so transparently bad that even Ethan's most socially oblivious friend, Leo, gave her a suspicious look. A math teacher, Mr. Harrison, a notoriously observant man with a penchant for psychological thrillers, grew particularly suspicious of Ethan, who was actually Lila, during his geometry class. Lila, despite being bright, was never particularly strong in math, whereas Ethan was a whiz. When Mr. Harrison called on Ethan to solve a complex equation on the board, Lila stared at it blankly, eventually offering, "It looks like a really aggressive triangle." Mr. Harrison narrowed his eyes. "Miller," he said slowly, "are you feeling quite all right? You're acting rather un-Ethan-like. Almost as if you've undergone a complete personality shift. Or perhaps a classic case of dissociative identity disorder." Lila just forced a shaky smile, sweating profusely. By the end of the day, both Ethan and Lila were utterly exhausted, their nerves frayed, and their brains aching from the constant effort of pretending. They met again at the park, collapsing onto the same rock, utterly defeated. "This is impossible," Lila, in Ethan's body, groaned, running a hand through Ethan's hair. "I can't live like this. My P grade is probably ruined forever. Try having Chloe ask you about Ryan's date while you're trying not to spill juice all over Lila's perfectly white shirt." Ethan, in Lila's body, retorted, his voice trembling slightly. "And I nearly broke my neck trying to walk in your stupid ballet flats." But as the initial panic and frustration began to subside, a new, more profound realization slowly dawned on them. Despite the utter absurdity and sheer terror of their situation, they had spent an entire day navigating each other's lives. They had experienced, firsthand, the subtle pressures, the unspoken expectations, and the daily routines that made up the other's existence. Lila, in Ethan's body, found herself thinking about the way Ethan's friends genuinely looked up to him for his intelligence and steady presence, even if they didn't always say it aloud. She realized how much pressure he was under to always be the smart one, the reliable one. And Ethan, in Lila's body, had seen, in just a few short hours, the constant barrage of social demands Lila faced, the endless questions, the expectations of being cheerful and perfectly composed, the subtle judgments from other girls. They looked at each other, their swapped bodies feeling both alien and strangely familiar. The initial horror was still there, but now, a flicker of something else began to emerge, a reluctant understanding. They were stuck, for now, in each other's shoes. And perhaps, just perhaps, this might not be entirely a bad thing. They would have to learn to live in each other's worlds. And in doing so, they might just learn a great deal about themselves and about each other. They had, after all, stepped into the looking glass, and there was no turning back. The initial shock and the comedic chaos of Monday had gradually given way to a grudging acceptance, followed by a deeper, more unsettling realization. They were truly trapped. The magic hadn't disappeared by Tuesday morning, nor by Wednesday. With each passing day, the reality of their body swap solidified, morphing from a fantastical nightmare into their bizarre new normal. They still met daily under the old oak tree in the park, their clandestine meetings growing longer as they debriefed each other on the day's events, swapping notes on how to best impersonate the other. Ethan, in Lila's body, found himself navigating a world he'd only ever observed from a respectful distance. He quickly learned that Lila's bubbly exterior often masked a relentless schedule and an intense pressure to maintain a perfect image. He saw the subtle glances from other girls, some admiring, some envious, and felt the weight of expectation from teachers who saw Lila as the quintessential achiever. He had to meticulously track her commitments, student council meetings, debate team practices, tutoring sessions for underclassmen, and a surprisingly intense schedule of volunteer work at the local animal shelter. He quickly understood that Lila's life wasn't just about popularity, it was about constant effort and an unspoken need to prove herself, both to others and, he suspected, to herself. He discovered the subtle art of girl talk, a linguistic minefield of emojis, coded compliments, and the unwritten rules of social hierarchies. Sitting through conversations with Chloe and Maya about the latest fashion trends, celebrity gossip, or the intricacies of teenage crushes, most notably, Lila's burgeoning situation with Ryan, was a constant test of his acting skills. He had to learn which lip gloss to apply, how to style Lila's hair just right, and even how to walk gracefully in her ballet flats, a skill that still occasionally resulted in near-catastrophic stumbles. He experienced the strange vulnerability of wearing clothes that were designed to emphasize curves he didn't possess, and the uncomfortable feeling of being looked at in a way he wasn't used to. He learned that Lila carried a small notebook filled with inspirational quotes and meticulously organized to-do lists, a silent testament to her drive. But it wasn't just the surface-level details. Ethan began to see the deeper currents of Lila's life. He overheard hushed conversations about college applications and future careers, conversations that revealed the high expectations her successful parents placed upon her. He noticed the weary sigh he, in her body, would sometimes let out after a particularly demanding day, the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was looking. He realized that the tiny drama and gossip that often swirled around Lila, usually dismissed by him as superficial, actually took a toll. He saw the subtle barbs from girls jealous of her popularity, the way rumors could spread like wildfire, and the constant need to present a poised, cheerful front, even when she felt anything but. He started to understand that Lila's seemingly carefree laughter sometimes served as a shield. Lila, in Ethan's body, meanwhile, was equally immersed in Ethan's world. She quickly recognized that while Ethan's life appeared less outwardly complicated than hers, it carried its own unique burdens. She navigated his more solitary routines, the quiet dedication to his science projects, and the subtle ways he supported his single mother. She found herself spending lunch breaks in the library or the computer lab, surrounded by Ethan's friends who, while socially awkward, were fiercely loyal and incredibly intelligent. She had to quickly brush up on her knowledge of obscure sci-fi lore and gaming mechanics, taking interest in lengthy discussions about quantum physics and the intricacies of D&D campaigns. She realized that Ethan was their silent anchor, the one they turned to for logical solutions and calm advice. She discovered the depth of his commitments outside of school. Ethan worked part-time at the Gear Shop, a small electronics repair store, to help his mom with bills. Lila experienced the exhaustion of long shifts, the satisfying clang of a successful repair, and the quiet dignity with which Ethan handled his responsibilities. She often saw Mrs. Miller working late into the evening as a medical transcriptionist, the light in her study burning long after the rest of the house was dark. One evening, as Lila, in Ethan's body, made her way to the kitchen for a glass of water, she saw Mrs. Miller hunched over her laptop, her shoulders hunched, a half-eaten, cold sandwich beside her. The sight of Ethan's usually vibrant mother looking so tired and worn, skipping dinner for work, hit Lila with a surprising force. It clicked then. This was why Ethan was so driven, so responsible, why he always put others first. He wasn't just helping his mom, he was quietly protecting her, easing her burden, carrying a weight no teenager should have to. He was a silent hero, and no one, not even she, had truly seen it before. Lila also discovered Ethan's hidden artistic talent. She stumbled upon his photography portfolio, a digital folder filled with stunning, often poignant images. There were breathtaking landscapes, intricate close-ups of insects, and dozens of candid shots of Lila herself, captured in moments of unguarded joy, deep thought, or quiet sadness. Each photograph was infused with a tender understanding, a depth of perception that only someone who truly saw her could possess. She saw herself through his eyes, not just the bubbly, popular girl, but a complex, vulnerable human being. A lump formed in her throat as she scrolled through them, realizing the silent, profound affection etched into every pixel. One afternoon, as Lila, in Ethan's body, was helping Ethan, in Lila's body, with a particularly confusing math problem from Lila's homework, they were sitting in Ethan's room, Lila's body perched awkwardly on a beanbag. Ethan's body sprawled on the floor, head propped on a pillow. Lila, seeing the frustrated furrow in Ethan's brow, gently explained a concept. Ethan, usually so quick to grasp things, was struggling, his mind still reeling from the day. As Lila patiently guided him, she realized how much he relied on his intellect, how much of his identity was tied to being the smart one. When he finally understood, a genuine smile lit up his face, Lila's face, and Lila felt a surge of warmth. "You know, Lila," as Ethan said softly, "Ethan, you really do take on a lot. More than I ever realized." She looked at him, in her own body, a newfound respect in her eyes. "You're always helping people, always fixing things, but does anyone ever ask if you're okay?" Ethan, as Lila, looked down, a rare vulnerability in her expression. "It's just, I guess I'm used to it. And I don't really know how to ask for help." He then looked back at Lila, a similar revelation dawning on him. "And you, Lils. I always thought your life was just parties and popularity. But you've got so much on your plate. And you put on such a brave face." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them. They had truly entered each other's worlds, not just physically, but emotionally. They had seen the struggles, the hidden strengths, and the quiet vulnerabilities that lay beneath the surface of the personas they presented to the world. They were experiencing each other's lives, day in and day out, feeling each other's triumphs and burdens. And in this strange, unsettling intimacy, a deeper connection was forging, a profound empathy that transcended their long-standing friendship. They were beginning to see, in the most literal sense, through each other's eyes, and in doing so, they were finally seeing each other for who they truly were. They were beginning to understand the depth of the other's heart, a depth they had both been too blind, or too afraid, to recognize before. Weeks melted into a bizarre routine. Ethan, in Lila's body, and Lila, in Ethan's body, had become disturbingly adept at impersonating each other, almost like professional method actors inhabiting their roles. They developed a secret language of subtle nods, eye rolls, and whispered codes to communicate critical information about classes, friends, and daily events. The initial horror had morphed into a strange, almost comfortable normalcy. They were still desperate to switch back, of course, but for now, they were making the best of it. And in doing so, they inadvertently started to break each other's carefully constructed worlds, creating a series of sweet troubles that were both hilarious and unexpectedly profound. Lila, trapped in Ethan's unassuming form, found her vibrant personality chafing against his quiet reputation. Her natural expressiveness kept bubbling to the surface, causing raised eyebrows among Ethan's friends and teachers. During a team meeting for the Westbridge Wildcats basketball team, where Ethan was supposed to be quietly taking notes as the unofficial stat keeper, Lila's competitive spirit flared. Ryan Carter, still the team captain, was complaining about a rival player, Mark Jensen, who had been particularly aggressive in their last game. "That guy is a menace," Ryan grumbled, "always fouling, always trash-talking." Without thinking, Lila, as Ethan, blurted out, "Well, maybe if you actually tried to block his shots instead of just staring at him, we wouldn't have this problem. He's not just aggressive, he's fast, Ryan. You need to anticipate." The entire team, including Ryan, stared at Ethan in stunned silence. Ethan never spoke up like that, let alone criticize the captain. Ryan's jaw dropped. Lila, realizing her mistake, quickly added, tactically speaking, of course. For future reference. Just an observation." A nervous giggle escaped her, his lips. The team exchanged bewildered glances, clearly wondering if Ethan had finally cracked under academic pressure. Ethan, meanwhile, inhabiting Lila's body, was forced into social situations he'd always avoided. The biggest of these sweet troubles came in the form of Ryan. Ryan, emboldened by his public confession and Lila's, Ethan's, blushing non-response, had taken her, his, silence as a shy yes. He started leaving notes in her locker, complimenting her, his, outfit choices, and even walked her, him, to class, much to Ethan's internal horror. The ultimate test came when Ryan invited Lila on a private date to the local drive-in movie theater. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't say no without shattering Lila's social standing and potentially hurting Ryan's feelings, which wasn't something Lila would do. He also couldn't say yes and go on a date with the guy who was crushing on his best friend, in his best friend's body. He sweated profusely through Lila's cute floral dress, managing only a non-committal, that sounds interesting. I'll have to check my schedule. One particularly hilarious and agonizing incident involved Ethan, as Lila, and a pair of ridiculously high heels. Lila had a formal event coming up, a student council fundraiser, and had bought a stunning pair of crimson stilettos to match her dress. Ethan, used to sneakers and practical shoes, looked at them with trepidation. "I can't possibly walk in these," he told Lila as Ethan, during one of their secret meetings. "They're like stilts." Lila, ever the fashionista, scoffed. "Oh, please, Ethan. Just practice. It's all about balance and confidence." Practice he did, in the privacy of Lila's bedroom, with predictable results. The day of the fundraiser, as he, in Lila's body, gingerly made his way to the school entrance, trying to project Lila's effortless grace, his ankle twisted, and he lost his balance. He went down with a spectacular flail of arms and legs, landing face-first right in front of the school's principal, Mr. Thompson, and a group of bewildered sophomores. His meticulously styled hair, Lila's hair, was a mess, and her dignity was in tatters. He scrambled up, bright red, managing a weak, just, testing the structural integrity of the pavement. Mr. Thompson just raised an eyebrow, clearly used to Lila's more dramatic antics. Despite these daily struggles, a peculiar transformation was occurring. They were slowly starting to understand what the other needed and how to provide it. Lila, in Ethan's body, began to notice how Ethan's quiet brilliance was often overlooked, his ideas sometimes dismissed because he didn't assert them loudly enough. During a science club meeting, when another student was taking credit for Ethan's groundbreaking idea for a sustainable energy model, Lila, as Ethan, stepped in. "Actually," she said, her voice firm, "that was Ethan's initial concept. He spent weeks researching the kinetic energy transfer for the prototype." Her unexpected assertiveness, delivered in Ethan's voice, shocked everyone, including the student trying to steal credit. From then on, Ethan's quiet contributions were given more weight. Lila was teaching Ethan, through her actions, how to stand up for himself, how to value his own voice. Ethan, in Lila's body, started subtly pushing Lila out of her comfort zone of constant people-pleasing. When Chloe and Maya were pressuring Lila to join a new, incredibly demanding club that she clearly didn't have time for, Ethan, as Lila, found himself saying, "You know what? I think I need to sit this one out. My schedule is already packed, and I need to prioritize." Chloe and Maya were stunned by the unexpected refusal, but Lila, the real Lila, watching from Ethan's body, felt a jolt of admiration. Ethan was teaching her, through his actions, that it was okay to say no, to prioritize her own well-being over external expectations. One late afternoon, after a particularly grueling day of being each other, they found themselves at the local lookout point, a hill overlooking Westbridge that offered a breathtaking view of the sunset. Lila, in Ethan's body, was leaning against the railing, watching the sky explode in hues of orange and purple. Ethan, in Lila's body, stood beside her, feeling the cool breeze on her skin. "You know, Lila," as Ethan said, her voice surprisingly soft, "I used to think your life was so easy, Ethan. Just quiet and uncomplicated." She turned to him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "But it's not. You carry so much for your mom, and you're so smart, but you never really let anyone see how much you're doing." Ethan, as Lila, looked out at the horizon, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. "And I thought your life was all sunshine and rainbows, Lils. All popularity and perfect grades. But you're under so much pressure. You work so hard to make everyone happy." He paused, then turned to face her eyes meeting hers, with a new depth of understanding. Maybe this whole body swap thing isn't so bad after all." Lila, as Ethan, chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that was still foreign but somehow comforting. "Yeah," she agreed, "it's definitely an experience. An absolutely terrifying, humiliating, but also kind of eye-opening experience." As the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in fiery streaks, they stood there, two souls in swapped bodies, sharing a moment of profound, quiet connection. The sweet troubles they had endured had stripped away their preconceptions, revealing the complexities and strengths beneath. They had started to protect each other in their own unique ways, and in doing so, they had begun to truly see and appreciate the person they were pretending to be. This strange ordeal was forcing them to grow, to empathize, and to recognize a budding affection that went far beyond mere friendship. They hadn't just switched bodies. Their hearts, too, were slowly, irrevocably intertwining. The Spring Fling, Westbridge High's semi-formal dance, was the talk of the school. Fairy lights draped across the gymnasium, a DJ spun upbeat pop music, and the air buzzed with excited chatter and the scent of cheap cologne and expensive perfume. Ethan, still in Lila's body, had dreaded this night. He knew Ryan would expect him to attend as Lila's date, and the thought filled him with a potent mix of anxiety and a strange, unfamiliar pang of something akin to jealousy. Lila, in Ethan's body, had insisted he go. "You have to, Ethan." If Lila suddenly bails on the Spring Fling after Ryan's public invitation, it'll be a social disaster for her. Just try not to let him get too close. So, there Ethan was, dressed in one of Lila's elegant, forest green dresses, feeling utterly out of place. He'd meticulously followed Lila's instructions for hair and makeup, and even managed to walk in her kitten heels without major incident. Ryan, looking handsome in a crisp suit, met Lila at the entrance, his eyes lighting up. "Lila, you look incredible," he said, offering his arm. Ethan forced a smile, feeling a fresh wave of panic. He spent the entire evening politely deflecting Ryan's attempts at hand-holding, slow dances, and meaningful gazes, all while trying to project Lila's charming yet slightly aloof demeanor. It was exhausting, a constant tightrope walk between maintaining the charade and not betraying his own discomfort. Meanwhile, Lila, in Ethan's body, had decided to attend the Spring Fling with Ethan's friends. Dressed in a borrowed suit jacket over a casual shirt, Ethan didn't own anything truly formal. She felt like an observer, a ghost at the feast. She mingled with Leo and the others, trying to maintain Ethan's quiet presence, occasionally offering a comment about a new video game or a recent sci-fi film. But her gaze kept drifting towards the center of the dance floor, where Ryan, undeniably attractive and charismatic, was monopolizing Lila's attention. She saw him lean in, whisper something that made Ethan, visibly flinch, then offer a genuine, warm smile. A knot formed in Lila's stomach. The next day, rumors spread through the school like wildfire. Did you see Lila and Ryan at the fling? They were practically inseparable. I heard he's going to officially ask her to be his girlfriend. The news hit Lila in Ethan's body like a physical blow. She was in the cafeteria, trying to blend in with Ethan's friends, when she overheard a group of girls at the next table. Poor Ethan Miller, one girl sighed dramatically. His childhood crush is totally going to be Ryan Carter's girlfriend now. Yeah, another chimed in, he's always been so quiet about it, but everyone knew he was head over heels for Lila. Guess he waited too long. Lila froze, a cold shiver running down her spine. Head over heels for Lila. The words echoed in her mind. A wave of unexpected, searing pain washed over her. She excused herself abruptly, leaving her lunch untouched. She walked aimlessly through the hallways, the voices of the gossiping students reverberating in her ears. That evening, unable to shake the unsettling feeling, Lila, in Ethan's body, found herself in Ethan's room, a place that now felt strangely intimate. She remembered seeing him pull a small, leather-bound notebook from a hidden compartment in his desk drawer a few days ago. Curiosity, sharp and undeniable, gnawed at her. She searched the desk, found the hidden latch, and pulled out the diary. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The pages were filled with Ethan's neat, precise handwriting, but the words themselves were raw, vulnerable, and deeply emotional. She read entries chronicling his quiet observations of Lila, his hopes, his fears, and his unrequited love. October 12th, Lila laughed so hard today at my terrible joke, she snorted juice out her nose. My heart literally did a flip. How can someone be so beautiful and so utterly goofy? I wish she knew how much I. He trailed off. February 3rd, she talked about college today, about going far away. The thought of her not being here, it's like a punch to the gut. I need to tell her. I have to. But what if I ruin everything? And then she found it, an entry from years ago, almost childish in its simplicity, but radiating with profound affection. May 1st, elementary school, Lila broke my first guitar today. By accident. She was trying to climb a tree and slipped, and it fell right on it. I wasn't even mad. She looked so upset, but all I could think was how much I love her, even when she's clumsy. I love Lila since she broke my first guitar. Tears blurred Lila's vision. She reread the line, I love Lila since she broke my first guitar, over and over again, the simple words cutting deep into her heart. All this time, all these years, he had loved her. Not just as a friend, not just as family, but truly, deeply romantically. And she had been completely, blissfully, obliviously blind. The pain she felt wasn't just guilt, it was a profound sense of loss, a sharp stab of regret for every moment she had unknowingly taken his love for granted. Her own feelings for Ryan, which had felt like a thrilling spark, now seemed trivial, superficial. What she felt for Ethan, this deep, abiding connection she'd experienced living in his skin, was something far more real, more enduring. A silent sob escaped her, his lips and hot tears streamed down Ethan's cheeks. The next morning, both Ethan and Lila arrived at their park meeting spot with a palpable tension in the air. Ethan, in Lila's body, was guarded, her face pale and etched with exhaustion from trying to fend off Ryan the previous night. Lila, in Ethan's body, was fuming, her eyes red-rimmed, the diary clutched tightly in his hand. We need to talk, Lila, as Ethan said, her voice strained. About what? Ethan, as Lila replied, trying to sound nonchalant, but her voice cracked slightly. About this. Lila, as Ethan, shoved the diary into her hands. About everything. About how you've been in love with me for years, and you never said anything. And how you let Ryan lead you on, and now everyone thinks I'm dating him. The words tumbled out, a torrent of frustration, hurt, and a confusing mix of jealousy and revelation. Ethan, as Lila, took the diary, his eyes widening as he recognized his own heartfelt confessions. His face, Lila's face, flushed crimson with embarrassment and a flicker of deep shame. You read my diary?" he stammered, his voice thin. "That's an invasion of privacy, Lila." "Invasion of privacy?" Lila, as Ethan, scoffed, stepping closer, his fists clenched. "What about my privacy? What about my life? You're out there, in my body, leading Ryan on, while I'm stuck here, hearing everyone talk about how my best friend is heartbroken because his crush is with another guy." The raw emotion in her, his voice was unmistakable, a mixture of anger and a deep, wounded ache. "You think this has been easy for me?" Ethan, as Lila, retorted, his own suppressed emotions finally boiling over. "I've been living your life, dealing with Ryan's advances, trying to keep your social life intact, all while watching the girl I've loved for years fall for someone else. What was I supposed to do, Lils? Confess my feelings while I was in your body?" The argument escalated, their voices rising, two souls in the wrong bodies, finally unleashing weeks of pent-up frustration, fear, and unspoken desires. Passers-by in the park gave them wide berths, staring at the strange spectacle of Lila and Ethan having such a public, impassioned fight. "If only you understood how I feel." Lila, as Ethan, shouted, tears streaming down Ethan's face. "If only you understood my heart." Ethan, as Lila, yelled back, his own voice breaking, Lila's face contorted in a mask of pain and desperation. As their frustrated cries reached a crescendo, a brilliant, almost blinding flash of light erupted from the sky above the old oak tree, momentarily illuminating the entire park. It wasn't a meteor this time. It was a sudden, intense burst, like a camera flash from the heavens. A powerful, dizzying sensation washed over them, a feeling of being pulled apart and then violently snapped back together. Their minds swam, and then, just as quickly as it began, the light vanished, leaving behind only the sound of their ragged breaths and the distant chirp of birds. They stood there, swaying, disoriented, their eyes squeezed shut. As they slowly opened them, the first thing they noticed was their hands. They looked down. Lila's slender fingers, adorned with a delicate silver ring, were undeniably hers. Ethan's longer, broader fingers, slightly calloused from his work at the gear shop, were his. They looked at each other, their faces etched with disbelief and a dawning, overwhelming hope. "Ethan?" Lila whispered, her own familiar voice a little hoarse, but distinctly hers. "Lila," Ethan replied, his deeper voice, filled with a tremor of shock, unmistakably his. They had switched back. They were in their own bodies again. The miracle they had been praying for had finally happened, triggered by the raw, unadulterated outpouring of their true feelings. But the relief was mingled with a new, agonizing awareness of everything that had been revealed, everything that had been said. The switch back was just the beginning of a different kind of challenge, a reckoning with the hearts they had so thoroughly misunderstood. The switch back was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly disorienting. They stood under the old oak tree, staring at their own hands, their own reflections in each other's eyes, as if seeing themselves for the very first time. The familiar comfort of their own skin was a strange sensation after weeks of inhabiting another's. Lila immediately ran her fingers through her own hair, a gesture of almost visceral relief. Ethan flexed his muscles, feeling the familiar weight and strength of his own frame. But the euphoria of being back in their bodies was quickly overshadowed by the heavy weight of what had just transpired. The raw confessions, the accusations, the diary, it all hung in the air, a thick, suffocating cloud. Their argument had stripped away every pretense, every carefully constructed wall. They were no longer hiding their true selves, but the exposure was painfully vulnerable. After a long, agonizing silence, Lila was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Ethan." She trailed off, unsure how to begin. The sheer enormity of his feelings, laid bare in his diary, combined with her own dawning realization of her true affections, was overwhelming. Ethan, his face flushed with residual shame and the fresh sting of having his deepest secrets exposed, couldn't meet her gaze. "I'm going home," he mumbled, turning abruptly. I need to think." He couldn't face her, not after everything. The thought of her knowing his every secret, every unrequited longing, was mortifying. He just wanted to disappear. For the next few days, they avoided each other like the plague. It was a stark and painful contrast to their weeks of forced proximity and intense, shared experiences. Lila felt a gaping hole where their daily debriefings used to be. Every time she saw Ethan in the hallway, he would quickly avert his gaze, his shoulders hunched, his usual polite nod replaced by an awkward silence. It hurt more than she thought possible. Lila was a whirlwind of confusion. On one hand, she was incredibly angry that Ethan had kept his feelings a secret for so long, that he hadn't trusted her enough to tell her. On the other hand, the contents of his diary, the sheer depth and constancy of his love, had deeply moved her. She replayed their argument in her head, hearing her own words, "If only you understood how I feel," and suddenly understanding the full weight of his pain. She knew now that her crush on Ryan had been just that, a crush, a fleeting fascination with the shiny, popular new thing. Living in Ethan's body, seeing his world, feeling his quiet strength and boundless kindness, had irrevocably shifted her perspective. She missed his steady presence, his quiet humor, his unwavering support. She missed him. The biggest complication, however, came in the form of Ryan. Unaware of the supernatural drama that had unfolded, Ryan, still riding the wave of his public confession and Lila's, Ethan's, perceived acceptance, redoubled his efforts. He approached Lila in the hallway after history class, a confident smile on his face. "Hey, Lila," he said, "I know the fling was a little chaotic, but I was thinking, maybe we could go out properly this weekend? Just us." Lila's heart sank. Before the swap, she might have been thrilled, her face flushed with excitement. Now, all she felt was a strange hollowness. She looked at Ryan, truly looked at him, his handsome features, his charming smile, the genuine admiration in his eyes. And she saw nothing. No spark, no flutter. No comparison to the deep, resonant connection she now felt with Ethan. The thought of spending time with Ryan, knowing the truth about her own feelings, felt dishonest. "Ryan," she began, her voice soft but firm, "you're a really great guy, and I'm super flattered, but I don't think we should go out." She saw the immediate hurt in his eyes, the confusion that clouded his handsome face. "It's not you," she quickly added, "it's me. I just realized something important about myself. And about what I really want." She offered him a small, regretful smile. Ryan, though clearly disappointed, was a good sport. He nodded slowly, a touch of sadness in his eyes. "Okay, Lila. I get it. No hard feelings." He walked away, leaving Lila feeling a strange mix of relief and a renewed sense of purpose. Her decision was clear. Her heart was no longer confused. Meanwhile, Ethan was drowning in a sea of self-pity and shame. He misinterpreted Lila's avoidance as disgust, convinced that she was repulsed by his years of unspoken affection. He saw her talking to Ryan again, unaware of the breakup conversation, and his heart clenched, confirming his worst fears. He believed she had chosen Ryan, that his confession, born of desperation and the strange magic of the swap, had only served to push her further away. He felt utterly foolish for ever hoping. He went to his mother that evening, a decision born of despair. "Mom," he said, his voice unusually quiet, "I've been thinking about college. And I think I want to apply for the early admission program to the University of Oregon, even though it's still a year away. And maybe apply for that study abroad program for next semester." The University of Oregon was a good school, but it was further away, a fresh start. The study abroad program would get him out of Westbridge, away from everything, away from Lila. He needed an escape, a way to mend his broken heart in anonymity. His mother, sensing the raw pain beneath his calm demeanor, looked at him with concern but ultimately supported his decision. "If that's what you truly want, sweetie," she said, pulling him into a comforting hug. "Just make sure you're making this decision for the right reasons." Ethan just nodded, his face buried in her shoulder, unwilling to admit the true reason was his aching heart. He filled out the forms, his hand surprisingly steady. The thought of leaving, of putting distance between himself and Lila, was both terrifying and a strange relief. He told his friends that he was considering an early start to college, focusing on his future. They were surprised but supportive, though Leo gave him a particularly long, knowing look. Lila, having dealt with Ryan, felt a renewed sense of urgency. She needed to talk to Ethan, to explain, to tell him everything. She went to his house, knocked on his door, but Mrs. Miller informed her that Ethan was out, running some errands. She tried texting, calling, but he didn't reply. It was almost as if he was actively avoiding her. Then, Chloe, always a fount of information, cornered Lila after school. "Lila, did you hear? Ethan's applying for early admission to U of O, and he's even looking into a study abroad program for next semester. He says he wants to get a head start." Lila's blood ran cold. Study abroad? Leaving next semester? Her heart hammered. He wasn't just avoiding her, he was planning to leave. He was trying to escape her, convinced that she didn't care, that she had chosen Ryan. The thought of him leaving, taking his quiet, profound love and his beautiful, artistic soul far away, filled her with a terror far greater than any body swap. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a potential goodbye. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, that she couldn't let him go. Not without telling him, truly telling him, how she felt. The body swap had shown her his world, had opened her eyes to his heart. Now it was time for her to open hers. The final act was upon them, a race against time and a final, desperate plea for their intertwined hearts. The day Ethan was set to leave was cold and gray, mirroring the turmoil in Lila's heart. A soft, persistent drizzle had begun to fall, a weeping sky mirroring her own unshed tears. He wasn't leaving for good, not yet, but his early departure for the University of Oregon, coupled with the talk of a study abroad program, felt like an irreversible step towards losing him forever. He was planning to take a bus from the downtown terminal, a quiet, almost anonymous exit. Lila had spent the morning in a frantic, desperate search for him, calling his house, his friends, even the gear shop, only to be met with vague answers. Finally, a text from Leo, filled with a cryptic emoji of a basketball, gave her a clue. He's probably at the old court. He always goes there when he's thinking. The old court. The Westbridge High basketball court. The very place where Ryan had publicly declared his feelings for her, unknowingly setting in motion the chain of events that had led them here. It felt like destiny, or perhaps a cruel irony, that it would also be the place of their final confrontation. Lila sprinted through the rain-slicked streets, her hair plastered to her face, her lungs burning, but a fierce determination fueled her every step. Her mind raced, rehearsing the words she needed to say, the feelings she needed to convey. She couldn't let him leave, not without knowing the truth, not without understanding how profoundly he had changed her. She burst onto the basketball court, her chest heaving, water dripping from her eyelashes. The court was deserted, the bright lines painted on the asphalt faded by years of sun and rain, now slick and dark with the drizzle. But there, standing alone beneath one of the hoops, his back to her, was Ethan. He was wearing his favorite worn hoodie, the hood pulled up, shoulders hunched against the cold and, she suspected, against the weight of his own sorrow. "Ethan," she screamed, her voice hoarse, cutting through the drumming rain. "Ethan, you idiot. You can't leave without hearing me out." He stiffened, then slowly turned. His eyes, usually warm and gentle, were clouded with a deep sadness, a hurt she instantly recognized as her own doing. When he saw her, soaked and breathless, a flicker of surprise, then something akin to pain, crossed his face. He said nothing, just stared, his expression a mixture of guardedness and weary resignation. Lila ran towards him, skidding slightly on the wet court, her arms flinging around his chest in a desperate hug. She squeezed him tight, burying her face into his wet hoodie, inhaling the familiar, comforting scent of him, a mix of old books, electronics, and that uniquely Ethan smell that had been so strangely comforting when she'd inhabited his body. "I love you," she sobbed, the words finally tumbling out, raw and unfiltered, mingling with the sound of the falling rain. "I love you, Ethan. Not because of some magic, not because we switched bodies, but because of you. Because of your kindness, your quiet strength, your incredible mind. Because you always see the best in people, even when they're being idiots. Because you were always there, even when I was too blind to see it." She pulled back slightly, looking up into his face, her own eyes brimming with tears. "I ended things with Ryan. I realized he wasn't you. No one is you. I want you, Ethan. I've always wanted you, I just didn't know it." Ethan stood frozen, his arms still by his sides, taking in her words. The confession, so fervent and unexpected, shattered the walls he had built around his heart. The pain in his eyes slowly softened, replaced by a dawning incredulity, then a flicker of hope, hesitant but undeniable. He saw the sincerity in her tear-streaked face, the desperate honesty in her gaze. A slow smile, small at first, then spreading, touched his lips. It was a smile Lila hadn't seen in weeks, a genuine, joyful smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "So," he said, his voice a little shaky, but filled with a profound relief, "you mean, you love me? My actual me?" Lila laughed through her tears, a joyful, watery sound. "Yes, you dummy. Your actual, wonderful, incredible you." He paused, looking down at her, his smile widening. "Well, then," he said, his voice deepening with affection, "I guess. I don't need to switch bodies anymore. I just need to be with you." And then he leaned down, his hands gently cupping her wet face, and kissed her. It was their first kiss, long overdue, made all the more potent by the journey they had just endured. It tasted of rain and salt and the sweet, exhilarating relief of finally finding their way home to each other. The kiss deepened, a silent promise exchanged under the dim, flickering stadium lights, amidst the gentle patter of the rain, the very place where all the misunderstandings had begun, and where, finally, they found their long-awaited resolution. They broke apart, breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. The rain continued to fall, but they didn't care. They were finally, truly in sync. The series concludes with a final shot of Ethan and Lila, hand in hand, laughing as they run through the rain-soaked court, chasing each other like the children they once were. Their laughter echoes, free and joyful, as the camera pans up to the gray, but now slightly brighter, sky. A voiceover, Ethan's voice, warm and reflective, narrates. "Sometimes it takes walking a mile in someone else's shoes, or, in our case, living weeks in their skin, to truly understand them. To understand their struggles, their dreams, and the hidden depths of their hearts. And sometimes, it's only when you've seen yourself through someone else's eyes, and truly seen them through your own, that you realize the love you've been searching for has been right there all along. Just waiting for your hearts to finally intertwine." The end.